kind of mental illness, senility. I reply, no, he's not senile. You have any pictures of your daddy? Officer Bow asks. My father has never liked having his picture taken. We have only a few of them at home, some awkward shots at my different school graduations, with him standing between my mother and me, his hand covering his scar. I'd hoped to take some pictures of him on this trip, but he hadn't let me. At one of the rest stops, I bought a disposable camera and pointed it at him anyway. As usual, he protested, covering his face with both hands, like a little boy protecting his cheeks from a slap. He didn't want any more pictures taken of him for the rest of his life, he said. He was feeling too ugly. That's too bad, Officer Bow offers at the end of my too lengthy explanation. He speaks English, your daddy. Can he ask for directions, etc.? Yes, I say. Is there anything that might make your father run away from you, particularly here in Lakeland? Manager Salinas asks. Did you two have a fight? I'd never tried to tell my father's story in words before now, but my first completed sculpture of him was the reason for our trip. A 3-foot mahogany figure of my father naked, kneeling on a 1/2-foot square base, his back arched like the curve of a crescent moon, his downcast eyes fixed on his very long fingers and the large palms of his hands. It was hardly revolutionary, rough and not too detailed, minimalist at best, but it was my favorite of all my attempted representations of my father. It was the way I had imagined him in prison. The last time I had seen my father? The previous night before falling asleep, when we pulled our rental car into the hotel's hedge-bordered parking lot. It was almost midnight. All the restaurants in the area were closed. There was nothing to do but shower and go to bed. It's like paradise here, my father had said when he'd seen our tiny room. It had the same orange and green wallpaper as Salinas' office, and the plush emerald carpet matched the walls. Look, Ka, he said, his deep, raspy voice muted with exhaustion. The carpet is like grass under our feet. He'd picked the bed closest to the bathroom, removed the top of his gray jogging suit, and unpacked his toiletries. Soon after, I heard him humming loudly, as he always did in the shower. I checked on the sculpture, just felt it a little bit through the bubble padding and carton wrapping to make sure it was still whole. I'd used a piece of mahogany that was naturally flawed, with a few superficial cracks along what was now the back. I thought these cracks were beautiful and had made no effort to sand or polish them away, as they seemed like the wood's own scars, like the one my father had on his face. But I was also a little worried about the cracks. Would they seem amateurish and unintentional, like a mistake? Could the wood come apart with simple movements or with age? Would the client be satisfied? I closed my eyes and tried to picture the client to whom I was delivering the sculpture. Gabrielle Fontenot, a Haitian-American woman about my age, the star of a popular television series, and an avid art collector. My friend Celine Benoit, a former colleague at the junior high school where I'm a substitute art teacher, had grown up with Gabrielle Fontenot in Tampa, and at my request, on a holiday visit home, had shown Gabrielle Fontenot a snapshot of my father piece, and had persuaded her to buy it. Gabrielle Fontenot was spending the week away from Hollywood at her parents' house in Tampa. I took some time off, and both my mother and I figured that my father, who watched a lot of television, both at home and at his Nostrand Avenue barber shop, would enjoy meeting Gabrielle Fontenot too. But when I woke up, my father was gone, and so was the sculpture. I stepped out of the room and onto the balcony overlooking the parking lot. It was a hot and muggy morning, the humid air laden with the smell of the freshly mowed tropical grass, and sprinklers showered hibiscus bordering the parking lot. My rental car, too, was gone. I hoped my father was driving around trying to find us some breakfast, and would explain when he got back why he'd taken the sculpture with him, so I got dressed and waited. I watched a half hour of local morning news, smoked 5 mentholated cigarettes even though we were in a non-smoking room, and waited some more. All that waiting took 2 hours, and I felt guilty for having held back so long before going to the front desk to ask, "Have you seen my father?" I feel Officer Bowe's fingers gently stroking my wrist, perhaps to tell me to stop talking. Up close, Officer Bowe smells like fried eggs and gasoline, like breakfast at the Amico. "I'll put the word out with the other boys," he says. "Salinas here will be in his office. Why don't you go on back to your hotel room in case your daddy shows up there?" Back in the room, I lie in my father's unmade bed. The sheets smell like his cologne, an odd mix of lavender and lime that I've always thought too pungent, but that he likes nonetheless. I jump up when I hear the click from the electronic key in the door. It's the maid. She's a young Cuban woman who is overly polite, making up for her lack of English with deferential gestures. A great big smile, a nod, even a bow as she backs out of the room. She reminds me of my mother when she has to work on non-Haitian clients at her beauty shop, how she pays much more attention to those clients, forcing herself to laugh at jokes she barely understands, and smiling at insults she doesn't quite grasp, all to avoid being forced into a conversation, knowing she couldn't hold up her end very well. It's almost noon when I pick up the phone and call my mother at the salon. One of her employees tells me that she's not yet returned from the Mass she attends every day. After the Mass, if she has clients waiting, she'll walk the 20 blocks from the church to the salon. If she has no appointments, then she'll let her workers handle the walk-ins and go home for lunch. This was as close to retirement as my mother would ever come. This routine was her dream when she first started the shop. She had always wanted a life with room for daily Mass and long walks, and the option of sometimes not going to work. I call my parents' house. My mother isn't there either, so I leave the hotel number on the machine. "Please call as soon as you can, Maman," I say. "It's about Papa." It's early afternoon when my mother calls back, her voice cracking with worry. I had been sitting in that tiny hotel room, eating chips and candy bars from the vending machines, chain-smoking, and waiting for something to happen, either for my father, Officer Bowe, or Manager Salinas to walk into the room with some terrible news, or for my mother or Gabrielle Fontenot to call. I took turns imagining my mother screaming hysterically, berating both herself and me for thinking this trip with my father a good idea. Then envisioning Gabrielle Fontenot calling to say that we shouldn't have come on the trip. It had all been a joke. She wasn't going to buy a sculpture from me, after all, especially one I didn't have. Where Papa? Just as I expected, my mother sounds as though she's gasping for breath. I tell her to calm down, that nothing bad has happened. Papa is okay. I've just lost sight of him for a little while. "How you lost him?" she asks. "He got up before I did and disappeared," I say. "How long he been gone?" I can tell she's pacing back and forth in the kitchen, her slippers flapping against the Mexican tiles. I can hear the faucet when she turns it on. Imagine her pushing a glass underneath it and filling it up. I hear her sipping the water as I say, "He's been gone for hours now. I don't even believe it myself." "You call police?" Now she's probably sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes closed, her fingers sliding back and forth across her forehead. She clicks her tongue and starts humming one of those mournful songs from the Mass, songs that my father, who attends church only at Christmas, picks up from her and also hums to himself in the shower. My mother stops humming just long enough to ask, "What the police say?" "To wait, that he'll come back." There's a loud tapping on the line, my mother thumping her fingers against the phone's mouthpiece. It gives me a slight ache in my ear. "He come back," she says with more certainty than either Officer Bowe or Manager Salinas. "He not leave you like that." I promise to call my mother hourly with an update, but I know she'll call me sooner than that, so I dial Gabrielle Fontenot's cell phone. Gabrielle Fontenot's voice sounds just as it does on television, but more silken, nuanced, and